Hi, everybody. It is great to be back at Earthfiles YouTube channel, and I have this huge chocolate who gets bigger and fluffier, it seems like, every day. And I wanted to start off with letting you guys see this big, beautiful guy. He is a big love bug, and if Fluffy comes back in, I'll get Fluffy, but at least today, here, look at how big chocolate is. He was a baby, it seemed like only a couple of months ago, and now he is really a big pal, and they are fantastic. Oh, here's Fluffy. I thought Fluffy come. Here, I'll show you Fluffy. And Fluffy is the alpha male, even though he's smaller. He is the one who determines the games, and he's got a great sense of humor. And I love these guys. Hello. And now, because just like cats, they don't like to be hemmed in, just like most humans don't. We'll let them play around, but at least you got to see how big they are right now. And that I'm going to try to share with you tonight one of the subjects that surprised me about how often I was running into it in Los Angeles at Conscious Life Expo and in Phoenix at the UFO Congress, and that it is a subject that I have privately been thinking was perhaps more serious than I had realized in the last 4 or 5 years, but it kept coming up among people who were in the audience as well as a couple of the speakers that I talked to. And that is the potential magnetic pole change and what is known as geocrustal shift. Now, to explain, let's start with seeing sort of in our mind's eye the central iron crystal core of our planet Earth. That solid core is 1,520 miles or 2,446 kilometers in diameter. That means it's a solid crystal metal ball that is 70% the diameter of our moon, and it's rotating inside the center of our planet. That iron ball is surrounded by an outer shell of liquid iron in which it turns. And that iron ball, the combination of that rotating iron ball inside of a liquid sort of iron shell is what creates the magnetic fields of Earth. Beyond those inner and outer iron cores is the mantle of very hot rock heated by radioactive elements that extends 1,800 miles from the core toward the surface of the Earth. And you could think of that hot mantle sort of like hot jello. It's soft, but not too soft, and the crust upon which we live is like the rind of an orange that ranges around the Earth in thickness from 5 miles up to 25 miles, and that hot rock mantle can rise into this rind or this crust that we live on and erupt as a more liquid lava in the surface volcanoes. Now, a magnetic pole change, or geomagnetic reversal as it's also called, is a change in our planet's magnetic field. And that means the positions of magnetic north and magnetic south will change, but the geographic poles will remain the same. So the Arctic would become the South Pole, or somewhere near the the Arctic, and the Antarctic would become the North Pole. Based on the magnetic, what are called fingerprints that are locked into ancient rocks and also into clays. There's a very special lake in Italy that has preserved a lot about our last pole change. And we know from these fingerprints that are around the planet that over the last 20 million years, magnetic north and south have flipped roughly every 200,000 to 300,000 years However, the last time the magnetic poles changed was much longer ago. It was 780,000 years ago. And so a lot of people say we're overdue for a magnetic pole shift. And what is really significant about what we know from the clays and the rocks of what happened 780,000 years ago, that the entire magnetic field change happened in about 100 years or less. Geologically, that is extremely rapid. And in the past 200 years, the Earth's overall magnetic field has reduced by 15%. If the magnetic field continues to decline, it might be a signal that the north and south magnetic poles could flip in this 21st century. The Earth's magnetic field is thought to be generated by the Earth's inner and outer cores, where the solid inner sphere of mostly iron and a little nickel rotates inside that liquid, kind of surrounding liquid I was talking about. And that geophysicists report that incredibly, the solid inner core, that big 70%, the diameter of our moon, like a crystal iron sphere, it actually rotates faster than the whole Earth rotates. I have been reporting at Earthfiles since January of 2011. Unusual, unexplained, loud booms, metallic and trumpet sounds in North America and other parts of the world. And one of the puzzling facts is that most boom locations have not had any seismic activity recorded by the U.S. Geological Survey. And yet, the thousands of people throughout North America and beyond who have experienced the booms say that at least one side of their house shakes, hard, rattling windows and floors and spooking dogs and cats and other animals. And adding to the puzzle is that some people think that the booms are coming from below ground while others think booms are coming from the sky above. And sometimes there have been these huge, mysterious, bright flashes of light that have anticipated the boom that comes after, even on very clear days and nights. In May 2013, a whistleblower contacted me through a retired communications and electronics expert who had worked for Hill Air Force Base contractors in Utah. There he came to know a geophysicist working on military contracts for the U.S. Air Force. The Hill Air Force Base geophysicist said in 2013 that mysterious booms that have become so repetitive and intense around the world mean, this is quoting him, something is going on in the inner core of the Earth. They, meaning his government collaborators, they don't know if it's a magnetic pole change that involves restructuring of minerals within the soil down to the mantle and the core. They don't know if it is a regular occurrence that happens in cycles on the Earth, or if it is a short-term boom phenomena related to crustal changes that could be related to a bigger phenomena, or something very serious. They really have no idea what is going on, close quote, 2013. The geophysicist used the analogy of the Earth's crust acting like a large speaker diaphragm projecting sounds through the mantle to the Earth's surface, where some infrasound frequencies were going up, he thought, through the atmosphere, hitting the ionosphere, and bouncing back as audible sound to the human ear. But the infrasound coming from inside the Earth, going up to the ionosphere, would never have been hearable to the human hearing, but it certainly could have been to dogs and other animals who have certainly reacted before booms and flashes of light. Some dogs have gone crazy, whining and jumping at walls, meaning that the dogs were hearing something that really bothered them before humans hear the huge boom and or see the white light. Now, I also asked the electronics expert about the bright white flashes of light associated with the loud boom phenomena. And he said it could be a very large static electric discharge associated with the apparent huge stress emanating from the inner and outer core to the liquid mantle beneath the Earth's crust. And he says he understands that there has been a change in the speed with which the mantle is moving, and those vibrations are affecting the mantle's magnetic conductivity. The Hill Air Force Base geophysicist said data showed vibrations in the Earth's core to mantle to crust from huge, sudden, unpredictable energy releases at the time of the mysterious booms might be all interrelated. But then in 2013, the why, the how were not understood, and the whistleblower and his colleague eventually disappeared within only a few weeks of communicating that much to me. But the loud, unexplained booms have persisted to this day. I have reported about them here at my Earthfiles channel. But what if another current 2017 to 2018 whistleblower could be pointing in the right direction when he says, Linda, what we are now dealing with is a pulse of energy coming from the huge black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. That it is measurable, that it has been heating up various layers of the galaxy, leading out to where we are in this seemingly backwater little finger, and that it might explain why there has been a general possible heating of our solar system and our Earth. And to explain just a little bit more, as I understand it, unproven to me, but certainly worth considering in this time of so many mysteries about what is happening on our planet. If there were a cyclic and repeatable pulse of energy from a black hole at the center of this galaxy, then every perhaps 5,000 to 7,000 years, there could be an impact. And if we went back through geologic time, we would come to the 11,500 to 12,000 years when something huge happened on the northern hemisphere side that wiped out 33 mammals. It's twisted the saber-toothed tigers' backs, caused tremendous changes in the northern hemisphere that remain a mystery to this day, with hypotheses about something coming in and interacting and causing sudden heating. If you keep going back, when you get to 18,000 years ago, that was the last peak of the last ice age. And as you keep going back through time, one of the hypotheses is that something that has been left out of equations might be a periodic pulse from the black hole, even if unproved, even if only a whistleblower's suggestion of something that might be occurring now. And here is why it is worth thinking about, because there's a lot of material now on the web, a lot of recent reporting about what happens if we get a magnetic pole flip in this 21st century. What would happen? Would the magnetic field go down to zero? And if so, unprotected, we would not be protected from solar wave energy coming in, and it might increase skin cancer. There might be disruptions in the magnetic fields enough that, say, porpoises and whales and dolphins and birds, they might be affected. And on is speculation, and details are not known. Except that the current whistleblower physicist suggests a very interesting possibility. And that's what some of us were talking about at the conferences. That if you get a pulse of energy that could increase the temperature all the way from the center of the Earth through the magma up to below the rind on which we live around the planet, and it could start melting that magma more than a singular volcano, that we might end up at some point when forces and densities and weights were just right, that the entire rind in a section of our planet could shift suddenly. And in a shift suddenly, there might be something called an equatorial snap, that instead of where the equator is now, it might snap northward, and that as it snapped northward, what would happen to the oceans? The oceans have to snap also, and what would the result be for lowland, mountains, oceans around the earth? Has it happened before? We certainly have the story of Noah. And if Noah was correct, and it's not somebody's phantasmagorical mythology, then planet Earth during the time of Noah, maybe 5,500, 6,500 years ago, maybe 11,000 years ago, there was global water until something shifted, changed, and everything settled back. And if in our future on this unstable planet of ours, there was something like periodic Noah floods that we haven't known much about, but we might be coming into a century of instability, then it's worth all of us learning as much as possible about crustal changes, magnetic pole changes. And what I'd like to do tonight is put out an appeal for anybody in geophysics or physics who might have information about these crustal changes and the idea of some kind of periodic flooding that could relate to the rind, the surface suddenly shifting. And I know that I've been reading that Albert Einstein corresponded when he was alive with Charles Hapgood, who was in the 1950s one of the first people to suggest that there could be violent periodic slips of the crust, and that Einstein thought that there was some reason to pay attention to this we'll call it geophysical hypothesis. And unfortunately, after Albert Einstein had written some letters and correspondence with Hapgood and others about this, within 5 years, he had passed on. So we're at a time where there seems to be concern in a lot of fronts about what could happen on our Earth that remains unstable volcanically, seismically. We have gotten papers saying that we could, in this decade of the next 10 years, suffer increasing amounts of seismic activity related to changes between our core in the mantle and the surface. I always say to people, none of this scares me. I think it helps us when we learn as much as possible as we can. So I am making an appeal that if there are geophysicists or physicists or geologists who may have more information about this possibility of a sudden crustal change, that I would like to hear from you. I always keep requests for confidentiality and anonymous whistleblowers close to my chest. I do not talk to anybody about people who request anonymity, and I have been doing this for almost 4 decades. So my interest is in data and facts that might actually be measurable from current satellites or other instruments that I could report at Earthfiles. And I would like to put out another appeal to the U.S. Army whistleblower who brought to Art Bell and me in April to June of 1996. The letters, the box of nearly pure aluminum, and the 6 pieces of bismuth, pure bismuth, layered with magnesium zinc. I'm doing a lot of work on this, and I would very much like to, if possible, if the Army sergeant who contacted me in Philadelphia back in 1996 on his way to Iran or Iraq, if he is listening, if anybody knows him, I would like to talk with him, at least confidentially. And for everyone, my email always, think of a reporter who files news about the Earth. It is earthfiles@earthfiles.com. This is feeling like a very important time of increasing energy. We may be headed to that big headline, "We're not alone in the universe." We could be headed toward another headline that we are entering an unstable geophysical time on planet Earth. All of it together is the kind of news that I like to understand and report the facts to you who have been tuning in on Wednesday nights as much as I have possibly been able to do these channel webcasts, and to my news website, earthfiles.com. And I would like to announce tonight, we are getting ready within the next week or two to opening up a brand new modern Earthfiles. And it will have all 2,600 and counting of my reports as a huge, valuable archive, as well as the new reports that I am doing. And it will all be in iPhone, iPad, digital accessibility more than it has ever been. So there is tonight, I want to take some of your questions. Upcoming, there's going to be a brand new Earthfiles for digital formats, and my need for all of you to help me to get in touch with whistleblowers in science who might have information about what I've talked about tonight, and always that I'm open to whistleblowers on all fronts, including UFOs and other life in this universe. So now Lori, who is this wonderful, wonderful collaborator on this, and her husband Michael, I would like to open the floor to you guys to ask me a few questions about what I've introduced, or your own independent questions.
Thanks so much, Linda. We've had a fantastic group today, and we have so many wonderful questions. So the first one is, are the booms somehow connected with anomalies of the Schumann resonances?
Well, that is a very interesting question. Our Earth has a frequency, the Schumann, which is about 7 hertz, and it can change over time. It may or may not, to a physicist, have its own changes in relationship to what would be going on at the big iron core sphere that I was talking about tonight. I would assume that if there were changes inside of our planet from any kind of frequencies that could be warming anything up and, say, melting more of the magma right below the Rhine upon which we live, that it might have an impact. But this is why I would really like to hear from whistleblower physicists and geophysicists who might actually have direct current information, and the rest of us, we are dependent upon going to various satellite websites like Swarm, which is always looking at the magnetic fields of the planet. And then we have the problem of we all need physicists and geophysicists to translate a lot of the website information because it's not always clear or understandable. So let's mark that the Schumann resonance, would it be changing? How would it be changing? Do we know how it changed in any way over the 780,000 years ago at the last magnetic field change? And what can we learn, all of us together, myself and all of you? What can we learn that would help us understand whether we are actually entering, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Is there something about resonance frequencies on our planet that might be a signal to what might be happening in the magnetic fields and this alleged black hole pulse from the Milky Way galaxy? I find this an exciting subject to learn as much as we can, and so let's put that on that as a question for all of us to learn more about, and I will do an upcoming Earthfiles report. Next question.
Great. Our next question is Linda going to give us any information on the taped Q&A with Luis Elizondo from this weekend?
Oh, I'm happy to talk about this. I had hoped that it would be more of like a dialogue. Like if I'm interviewing somebody and I go for 3 hours and I go deeply into a subject, which happens quite often, then what I give to you in Earthfiles and Coast to Coast is the best, the most interesting, the most provocative from, let's say, a 3-hour interview that might be cut down to 2 11-minute segments or 22 minutes. That's the way I work. I'm always trying to go to the meat. And I think that Luis Elizondo and his colleagues into the stars are at a point where they feel like they would like to answer, but I had the feeling when I finished watching the videotape that all of the questions that I'd hoped to hear deep dialogue about, that didn't happen. It was much more superficial. And maybe it's timing. Maybe if we can get through another month or two, maybe if they can get out another video or two, which we all heard, both in Los Angeles and in Phoenix, that there are 2 more videos waiting to be shown like the first. I mean, I'm not saying that they were identical to the first 2 videos, but at least 2 more videos of something in the unexplained aerial phenomena are supposed to be waiting in the wings. Now, maybe they would like to get those out, see what the general New York Times and Washington Post crowd would say about those 2 videos. Then maybe they're going to try to keep doing this by videos. But I think that there would be increasing general audience frustration if we don't get a lot more meat along with the videos. I would love to do an in-depth 3-hour discussion of every possible question that I could possibly think of with Luis Elizondo or Commander David Fravor or others in the To the Stars. And then if we could all start doing that, really in-depth, no holds barred discussions, then I think it would move everything forward more fast. If the Q&A is done as a buffer zone, then I don't think people will feel like that we're getting all of the facts that we might, and certainly we want. I know that all of you and I and a lot of my colleagues, we've been in this mystery for a very long time. We have been exposed to military people who have had face-to-face with non-humans, can talk about what it's like to get a telepathic download. Frankly, I think that's the level at which, if they started to open up the whole big enchilada of our ancient past being from extraterrestrial civilizations, the Anunnaki, the Sumerian, the Greeks, all the way to maybe Avi Loeb at Harvard is right. when he speculates that the fast radio bursts could be related to light speed transport. That hasn't been proven. It hasn't been disproven. And the idea of a neutron star, a special kind of neutron star close to a big black hole, as being the answer to fast radio bursts, that hasn't been proven either. So we have a mystery far away, and we have mysteries on our own planet going back from 5,000 to 11,000 to 35,000 to a million to probably 270 million years, when there have been, as far as I can tell from everybody who has talked to me about data that they've seen, that we're on a planet that has been the base for a lot of different extraterrestrial intelligences, or other time traveler intelligences, or intelligences that come from another dimension and base in the matter worlds and then go back someplace else. Any and all of the above could be the source, but the manifestation in the matter world on our planet is a long history of extremely advanced civilizations that have mined, that have harvested genetic material, and have manipulated DNA and already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. That's the meat that I would like to see talked about. Another question?
Absolutely. Here's one more. I have never heard Linda speak of the Zendras and the contact in Peru at Mount Shasta. Is she familiar with this?
I know Mount Shasta by going back to the 79 to 89 period, when I was in Denver, Colorado, and part of that time I was head of the Special Projects Department at the CBS station in Denver, where I did A Strange Harvest. That is my only firsthand information, and that was that Mount Shasta, when I was working on A Strange Harvest about global bloodless, trackless animal mutilations, the Mount Shasta was described by people in the local vicinity where there had been animal mutilations, all the way from Vancouver down through the western coast of Washington, Snohomish, definitely a repeatable place, down through Oregon, down into California, Mount Shasta. There were associations with various types of what we'll call non-Homo sapien sapien. Sasquatch or Bigfoot, tall blondes, short blondes, tall grays, short grays, varieties of grays, a praying mantis. I remember getting a photograph. It actually looked like a giant 8 to 12 foot tall praying mantis in the distance next to some kind of a silver craft. I have never known, because when you just get a photo and you don't have people who will describe what it is, it's very difficult for a reporter to just say, here is a photo I got, and it's supposed to be X, Y, and Z. But I'm giving you a texture of various things, all in that corridor from Western Canada and Vancouver and over into British Columbia and Alberta. But if you come all the way down Washington, Oregon into Northern California, that I have heard all of these various layers related to abductions, animal mutilations, various types of craft, types of beings, and great interest by a variety of some kind of other than human in that part of our world. And that's where I first heard about Mount Shasta as being a location for what are known as the tall blondes. Today, in 2018, I understand from Grant Cameron and others that there is a huge variety of lights and beams and beings and all kinds of things allegedly occurring around Mount Shasta. It's just not my investigations, so I can share only what I learned back when I was working on A Strange Harvest. Now, there might be one more question. We'll make this our last tonight, and it's great to be back. So I'll listen for the next question.
All right, last question. With the poles shifting, how fast and drastic will this take place?
Good question. The best of data, and I've reported about this at earthfiles.com. For those of you who are subscribers, go up in the quick search and just put in pole shift or magnetic pole, and you'll see how much reporting I have done about this. One of the best was a scientist. It is an interview with a geophysicist, and he and a team were studying the clay silt, almost like pudding silk. And it is in a very specific lake in Italy where they found that going all the way back 780,000 years, that they've got what they call the fingerprints or the footprints of what happened then. And in that fine clay, that was the paper that astonished everyone because it was based on such great physical detail from that Italian lake, that it appears that the last magnetic pole change occurred within 100 years. Those were the headlines about within the lifetime of a human being. That is, in geologic time, so rapid. And we'd all like to know. I remember asking that physicist, does anybody from any direction know what happened to the birds, to the the marine animals that depend upon geomagnetic fields? Does anybody know what happened? And the answer generally is no. Some people have been running computer models trying to answer that without feeling that they have much confidence. But here is the good news. When you Google or go to Wikipedia, magnetic pole changes on Earth, and you see how many there have been going back to, let's say, the time of the dinosaurs. Well, there's been a lot. And there's been no wipeout, no serious catastrophe that has been associated in any kind of a general way with the magnetic poles changing. So what happens, though, in the details, such as if the magnetic field, let's say, goes down way low for maybe a few months, then more of the solar wind and solar particles would get down to the surface of the Earth where we all live. And that's where they say there could be an increase in skin cancers, maybe eye problems. The UK Daily Mail has talked about very big disruptions possibly in electric grids off and on because the magnetic field will go up and down based on what happened in 100 years. Now, we have so far in 2018, we're not aware of there being any big power outages or a problem like that because the magnetic field has dropped low. But we are at 2018, the middle of the century will be when we get to 2050. So there is a lot of ground that we will be covering in the next decade. And the physicist whistleblower said to me that it is his understanding that whatever might be related to a cyclic energy pulse from the center of our galaxy, that it might not be clear to Earth for, let's say, another 5-10 years. So we might be in one of those decades where a lot is going to happen. But before any concern on that, let's all try to get everybody to the stars and Congress and Elon Musk and everywhere we can. Let's try to persuade the planetary power system that we're all ready for the truth about the fact that we're not alone in this universe and that a heck of a lot has happened on this planet for at least 200 170 million years in which there were allegedly competing extraterrestrial biological entities mixing and matching genes, harvesting gold, using planet Earth for their own needs. Thanks, and I'll see you next Wednesday with maybe Fluffy and Chocolate again.